точка, немножко другочка, точка, точка, цветочка. Гемсession.
Le dropshipping. И вот прикинь, что он мне говорит. Говорит, как сделать сайт? Он говорит мне, как сделать сайт? Я говорю, как? Регистрируйся на мой тренинг. Вот здесь вот есть кнопочка, нажимаешь и попадаешь на мой тренинг по созданию сайта с нуля. Это 5-дневный тренинг, на котором я научу тебя гарантированно создавать свой сайт. И ты не только его создашь, ты научишься им управлять. Нажимай на кнопочку, регистрируйся, и у тебя гарантированно будет сайт. До встречи. Нажимай.
Наконец,
Hey everyone, Tony Winston here for Jazz Piano College, but this is...
По лесу, говорит, идешь. Не знаешь, да? Видел ты? Он до себя говорит, разбежался и укусил.
This is another video that really goes out to any improvising instrument, guitar, sax, trumpet, trombone, whatever. And what we're going to look at today is something that Jerry Coker calls Kesh, C-E-S-H. It's a really terrible term, contrapuntal elaboration of static harmony. But, you know, forget that term, just look at what's going on here. And I've covered this with harmony before, but I've never covered it with like doing with like bebop lines. So here it is. You know, say you have an A minor chord, all right, and you just move the root down like this. You know, kind of like it does in Stairway to Heaven. Go like that. You come back up if you want. All right. So you're taking a chord. You know, the chord symbol might just say A minor or A minor seventh for 2 bars or something, and you're just messing around with one of the notes. You're moving the root down like that, or back up, or you could take the fifth and move it up like this. All right, kind of gives you that James Bond sound, like that. And the examples in the book are most, all right, kind of chord symbol might just you're taking a chord, you know, the chord symbol might just say A minor or A minor seventh for 2 bars or something, and you're just messing around with one of the notes. You're moving the root down like that, or back up, or you could take the fifth and move it up like this. All right, kind of gives you that James Bond sound, like that. And the examples in the book are mostly on minor chords. stuff like that. You know, say you're going from a G minor seventh to a C seventh. All right, that's a G minor seventh, and this is a C seventh. Piano players will understand this. G minor, C, seventh to a C seventh. All right, like that. You know, say you're going from a G minor seventh to a C seventh. All right, that's a G minor seventh, and this is a C seventh. Piano players will understand this. G minor, C. So there, you know, moving the root down like that. Didn't do it in the left hand, just did it with my line. There I did it on F minor. But it also could be used on major chords as well. Like that. In fact, there's a really famous song called The Best Is Yet to Come. Out of the tree of life I just picked me a plum. Where the melody actually uses that concept. And the other way, of course, is take the fifth and move that around. All right, now there's some good examples in the book here. And I'll give you a few of those. So here's one, Dizzy Gillespie used it. I'm also going to give you a few examples just on a couple of songs I picked out here. But you're on A minor. All right, so let's look at that line again. All right, there's that major seventh, then the flat seventh, and then, you know, we're already on to D7 by this time, but, you know, on the A minor chord. All right, here's Tenor Madness, Sonny Rollins. 2, 3, 4. All right, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pump, pump. All right, Bebop by Dizzy Gillespie. Say that 3 times fast. Bebop by Dizzy Gillespie. Bebop by Dizzy Gillespie. 1, 2, 3. All right. And the chord symbol's just F here, so 2, 3. All right, a few other examples here. Let's see, Billy's Bounce. Yeah. No, that's a neat one because there's the major seventh, and then it's the minor seventh there. I say minor seventh, flat seventh. You know, I'm just talking about the interval. Right, 11s. All right, George Coleman. There, Sonny Stitt. Stanley Turpentine. Pretty nice. I don't know, add a little bit there on my own. Paul Chambers on bass, I'm going to play it up higher. So on C7th, you could think of it as G minor 2. That's this G minor parentheses.
Смотрю, вот,
Your DNA is probably already in a database. You didn't have to provide a sample or give consent, but the unique sequence of A's, T's, G's, and C's that make you you are searchable nonetheless. So if you committed a heinous crime and left a bit of your DNA, law enforcement could search it in a database and identify you. This video includes a discussion of serious crimes, which may be disturbing for some viewers, so I wanted to let you know that up front. But I think it's necessary to talk about these crimes in some detail for reasons that will become apparent. In the small town of Visalia, California in the mid-1970s, one of the state's most prolific criminals got his start. He repeatedly broke into houses and stole small items like cash, coins, and jewelry. He was dubbed the Visalia Ransacker, but soon his crimes escalated.
6 months later, in 1976, he moves up to Sacramento, and over the course of the next 3 years is moving all across Northern California, committing numerous sexual assaults, over 50 sexual assaults.
Here, he was called the East Area Rapist.
The police are saying lock up tight. Sacramento's infamous East Area Rapist may still be in town.
And then in 1979, he moves down to Southern California, starting in Santa Barbara, and starts killing. And he was known as the original Night Stalker in Southern California.
Variously known as the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker, these were brutal, meticulously planned crimes that spanned numerous California counties between 1976 and 1986.
Police believed that all of these crimes were committed by the same person, now known as the Golden State Killer. How was it known that these were committed by the same person?
Investigators were relying on MO. MO, modus operandi, is basically how a criminal will commit a crime.
Was wearing some type of a mask or a hood. Was wearing shorts and a t-shirt.
The Golden State Killer had a very distinctive MO. What he would do is he would break into a house with a gun, a house with a man and a woman. He would tie them up, tell the man, I'm going to put plates on your back. If I hear those plates move, I'm going to kill your wife and then kill you. Take the wife into another room and sexually assault her. Then he would go through the house for however much time, eating, stealing stuff, stealing little things or whatever, and then he would leave.
How was he not caught based on fingerprint evidence?
Well, he didn't leave his fingerprints. He always wore a mask. He always had gloves on. This was an offender that did everything to prevent himself from being caught.
The Golden State Killer has been linked to at least 12 murders, 50 rapes, and a string of burglaries throughout California.
How's it going?
How you doing?
Good. So we supply DNA sequencing solutions to the forensic laboratories that process crime scene DNA. At a crime scene, there's typically less than a nanogram of DNA left, and it's usually degraded. Right, so it breaks down.
Why is there so little at a crime scene? A nanogram?
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes.
There's no accident that he stops in 1986. 1986 is when the first DNA case of a murder case is actually solved with DNA. And I think he's following that, and he's saying, you know what I'm doing here, I'm leaving my DNA
I can't do this anymore.
Investigator Paul Holes tracked the Golden State Killer for decades.
He couldn't account for DNA technology, and that really was his big mistake. That was the critical mistake. He left his DNA all over California, and it turns out that 3 of the cases, I had 3 sexual assault kits, and that's where I got the Golden State Killer's DNA from Northern California.
But having the unknown killer's DNA wasn't enough. They needed to match it to a known sample. In 1990, the FBI started work on what would become a national genetic database. It mainly stores DNA profiles from convicted criminals and persons of interest. It's called the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS for short. In each of your cells, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes, one from your mom and one from your dad. And at particular places on some chromosomes, there are short sections of DNA that repeat, like AATG, 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 and so on. These are called short tandem repeats, or STRs, and different people have different numbers of repeats. Forensic labs produce STR profiles by counting up the number of repeats at each location. Initially, there were only 13 places on the DNA where STRs were counted, but in 2017, that was expanded to 20.
It feels to me like that's not that much information.
It isn't.
But the chances of 2 people having the exact same number of repeats at all locations is incredibly small. The CODIS database now contains over 18 million STR profiles.
Golden State Killer's DNA profile has been up at the National DNA Database that's run by the FBI called CODIS since 2001 and has been searching ever since with no hits. We did Interpol searching, trying to search other countries' DNA databases, thinking, well, maybe it came from out of the country. That's why, after all this time, we have yet to be able to identify him. And obviously, we didn't get any hits.
But genetic sequencing technology was advancing rapidly.
The Human Genome Project was completed. Since 1986, scientists had been mapping and sequencing the 3 billion nucleotides contained in the human genome. It's anticipated that
Soon, private companies began offering genetic tests directly to consumers, and they provide far more genetic data than what's in the CODIS database. I traveled to Houston, Texas to visit Family Tree DNA headquarters.
We'll go in the lab and we'll start talking about the life cycle of a sample. There you go.
Thank you. These samples, what are they?
So they're cheek cells. They just scrape the inside of their cheek, they put a cap on, and they send it back to us.
It's like a robot ballet.
Yes. So for DNA extraction, we need to remove all of the protections that are on the DNA and just separate it by itself so we can do testing on that.
Instead of looking at 20 places on your DNA, these tests examine 700 to 800,000.
The Family Finder test is based on what's called a microarray. And this is what a microarray looks like. Each one of those boxes is an individual. We can fit 24 individuals on here. And within that box is about 710,000 positions of your DNA that we're measuring, we're getting data for.
710,000.
Yes, and they're called SNPs.
So, hang on, that's like 710,000 individual bases, like ATGC.
Yes,
For each person, you can measure 24 on that single chip.
correct.
The human genome consists of 3 billion bases. All people share about 99.9% the exact same DNA, which means, on average, only about 3 million bases differ from person to person. These individual letter changes are known as single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs.
So on there, are there a whole bunch of like little pieces of DNA then?
Yes, so what we have is a short piece of DNA that is specific to one SNP. So it's one position in the genome where we know there can be a difference.
Okay. Is there any example of a simple SNP that, confers some sort of...
Actually, blue eyes is a single base change.
Really?
Yeah.
So everyone with blue eyes has this
Is a
one letter change.
Mhm.
You can see now it's starting to scan the first box.
The results of your 710,000 SNPs can tell you about your geographic ancestry or possible medical conditions, but they can also quantify how related you are to someone else. The genetics of having a kid are a bit like cutting two decks of cards together. The resulting deck will share about half its cards with each parent, and there will be long sequences of cards which match identically sequences in each parent. Now, if this deck has a kid, well then its offspring will share only about a quarter of its cards with each grandparent, and the sections of identical cards will be shorter. And this is how it works with DNA. The more closely you're related to someone, the more DNA you share, and the longer the blocks of identical DNA are. But to compare the DNA of two people, you don't need to read every letter. The SNPs are sprinkled throughout the DNA roughly every 2,000 bases. So if you find long sections where the SNPs match up, you can bet that the DNA in between is identical too. And by comparing hundreds of thousands of SNPs sprinkled throughout the DNA, you can see where these identical blocks start and stop, and so how much total DNA is shared.
Everywhere that is highlighted in blue is where I share DNA.
With your father?
With my father, which is exactly what you expect, because I should share DNA with him everywhere, because he gave me 50% of my DNA. So this is a second to third cousin. I have no idea who this person is. And you can see here, we are definitely not as closely related as me and my dad, because where the blue is, those are the only regions of the chromosome where we share DNA.
We all know that these genetic tests can help identify our relatives. But the question is, can you do the same thing with law enforcement databases?
Can you identify family members using the CODIS database?
You can, and it's only limited to really first order and second order relatives.
That means if I'm looking for the Golden State Killer, I'm looking for either his father, his brother, or his son. We did that over and over and over again with no hits.
Why is it so limited?
Because you've only got 23 loci. If you want to do proper kinship analysis, you need to have more points assessed on that genome to see how related you really are.
We know the answer is behind the locked door, and the answer is behind the locked door of 23andMe and Ancestry.com. We know that they have millions of profiles. Somebody related to him, a second cousin, I would guess, would be in there, sure. And that was very hard to deal with. You know, that the answer is there, behind this locked door.
Law enforcement is not allowed to search the databases of 23andMe and Ancestry.com, but luckily for investigators, there was another way. An independent website called GEDmatch had been set up to allow people to connect with relatives. You can upload the raw data from any of the big genetic testing companies and search for matches.
So when we initially search the GEDmatch database, our best hits come.
Searching? Not searching yet, I know where my matches are. Ладно. No, there is mine. No, that's mine, mate. Ух ты, блин, 11:30. Спать уже надо. Вообще просто.
Back at third cousins, which means they shared, you know, our top hit, I think, shared about 1% of the DNA. It's very little
Ладно,
DNA
тогда
they
иду
shared.
спать уже.
But
Все так думают. Что такое? Всем привет, пока. Спасибо. See you soon. Ян только расписал. Да, Баян просто перестёрн, да, Баян просто перестёрн, да. Там никто даже не видит, наверное, да. Да какая нахер разница, так уж просто. Ну и ладно, разница. Да без разницы. Без разницы. Куда идти? Спать не дают, не скажи, все, роман, скажи, спать не дают. Ладно, все. Кто там? Спасибо. Real Godfather. Ну, круто. Трейдмарк 2001 года. 2001, простите. Great. Мани. Манный Джеймс. Мани, то есть мани.